So the Vatican has released their daily updates on the health of the Pope, and people are wondering, how do you translate this? Because in reality, you never know the full story about the Pope's health, or nor should you know really the full story about the Pope's health from press briefings. If you remember back to when Pope John Paul II died, up until 2 days before his death, they were saying, "Oh, the Pope is okay. He's sitting up. He's celebrating Mass in his private chapel, etc., etc., and his convalescence is proceeding." That was 2 days before his death. Even though we saw him wheeled out on his wheelchair just a week previously at Easter, and he was trying to give a blessing. He was trying to speak, and he couldn't. It was a really sad time uh, for the church to see him in that way. But I suppose it's just so that people can translate. Well, what is the situation of the Pope's health, and when will you know how grave the situation is? You will know about 1 to 2 days before he dies. That's the way it will work. They won't reveal too much details until 1 to 2 days before he gets ill. I mean, Pope Francis was the eldest of five siblings, and three of his siblings have already passed. His father died very young. His mother as younger than him as well. So I suppose, just to put it into context, it's something that we will all face at some stage, and just pray for the Pope at this time, as he advances towards where we will all go at some stage. In Rome, from what I can see, from what I hear, there's a lot of talk and speculation going around. If he comes out, will he renounce the papacy, or will he die in office? People are, speculating. The next conclave will be the largest conclave in the history of the Catholic Church. Never before will you have had 138 cardinals, if it was called at this moment in time 138 cardinals in one conclave. In the previous conclave, it was 115. So it's going to be a very, very interesting time over the next couple of years. And I'm going to say something about Pope Francis, in the sense that people are very critical of what he's done in the church, and don't underestimate the capacity of unintended consequences to what he did. I think what the church desperately needs now, is a great leader, a pope who is able to unite the church, to bring together the different strands of the church, and to capture Catholicism like no other has ever done before. John Paul II, when he came on the scene, he was truly inspirational for many Catholics, especially in Poland. And he was a man for his time, a great intellectual, a saint, somebody that understood union with God. And Pope Francis is obviously different. He's the post Vatican II Pope. He was ordained just as the liturgical reforms were coming into place. If you look at his first Mass, it's very, very much a dressed down Mass. It's certainly not a Mass like Pope Benedict would have celebrated as his first Mass. And, as we've seen during this papacy, Pope Francis isn't, well, he doesn't understand or appreciate or have any liking for the traditional Latin Mass. I suppose that has been clear. But then again, don't underestimate the capacity of God to draw something from this papacy that none of us anticipated. Because there are things that the Pope has done that I do agree with, even though people might say I'm critical of Pope Francis. But some of his reforms well, I can just say it straight out, some of his reforms were needed in the church, especially when it comes to founding new communities, taking that decision making away from a local bishop and asking Rome to, give their approval for a new community, I think is a good idea. I do think it's a good idea. The Latin Church, the Roman Church, the Catholic Church, especially the Latin Church, has this massive proliferation of different congregations, different groups, communities being founded all over the world, and some of them weren't done properly. They didn't have the proper oversight, and some founders manipulated local bishops to found their communities, such as the Legionaries of Christ and other communities, and have caused problems in years to come. So I do think some of the reforms that Pope Francis did are interesting, and it'll as I said, it might be decades to come out of this, and who will be the next successor will be interesting as well. Out of 138 cardinals, who will they pick? Remember, it was from people often criticize John the 23rd for calling the council and Paul the Sixth, and forget that it was they weren't just picked out of thin air. They Pope Paul the Sixth was Pius the XII's secretary, and he was formed for a role. But I really do think it's a fascinating and interesting time to be Catholic. I honestly do say this. I know people always look at the negative, but I think we're in a moment of history that is truly incredible, where the world is looking for something greater than what it's been offered in this hyper-technological, interconnected world, where we have everything, where people, they've tested everything, they've seen everything, people have tried sex, drugs, all of the things that the world has to offer, and they finally realize that they're not happy. And we have this great adventure of offering them Christ, and I really do think people might be surprised what happens in the next decades in the church. The God of surprises that comes along, that's really what I will say, because the faith is bigger than any of us, and I think the encounter with Christ is truly something that the world is yearning for, is looking for. But really do pray for the Pope. And just understand you're not going to get the full story until they want to share the full story. So it'll be 1 to 2 days before things get serious that they'll release a very detailed press conference. This is what happened with John Paul II. The day before he died, Joaquin Navarro Valls, who was the spokesperson at the time, then he releases, more details, and the Pope has a urine infection, and he has this and he has that, and things are getting. People knew then, okay, this was getting serious, and that's when things moved. You're not going to really know much before that. A bit like how the Queen died. People knew she was dying, but at the end it all came very quickly, and that's fine. People are entitled to live out the last days of their life, and have the privacy of just getting on with life until they know that it's time to go. But I suppose we just have to pray for the Pope, really, and I hope people will do their part in strengthening the faith in that's needed at this moment in time. It's desperately needed. The church will only be renewed and reformed with saints, and it's up to each and every one of us to take up that high challenge, which you can't just abnegate. You can't just say, no, that's for somebody else to do. That's for that guy to do, or that woman to do, or the clergy to do. We all have to take our part. Anyway, God bless you. Take care. Bye bye.